In this episode of Cumorah Rama, we're going to talk about the prophets versus the intellectuals. And the reason is that the prophets and apostles have consistently taught that Cumorah is in New York. They've been teaching this for decades, starting with Joseph Smith, Oliver Cowdery, Brigham Young, Heber C. Kimball, Wilford Woodruff, Orson Pratt, Joseph F. Smith, James E. Talmage, Joseph Fielding Smith, Grand Richards, Marion G. Romney, Mark E. Peterson, and many others have all taught that Cumorah is in New York. So why do we have the idea that Cumorah is not in New York, that there are two Cumorahs somehow? It's because the intellectuals over here teach that Cumorah is not in New York. They teach it's anywhere but New York, actually. Part of that is they teach that the prophets were merely speaking as men and that the prophets were wrong. I'm going to list just a few of the most well-known teachers and authors. John Sorensen at BYU, John W. or Jack Welch at BYU in the law school, Kirk Magleby, who works at Book of Mormon Central, Tyler Griffin, professor at BYU, teaches Book of Mormon classes, Noel Reynolds at BYU, Brant Gardner, a well-known author who's written about this extensively, and of course all the employees in the curriculum, history, and correlation departments of the church downtown teach this. Now once in a while I'll have people tell me they don't believe that these intellectuals are really teaching the prophets are wrong. Well, let me just give you an example here. I have a book here by John Sorensen. You may have seen it. It's called Mormon's Codex. It has a foreword by Terrell Givens, another well-known intellectual in the church. It's published by Deseret Book and the Neil A. Maxwell Institute at BYU. And it says right on the front, an ancient American book. But it's talking about the Book of Mormon as a Mesoamerican codex. Here, this is you can read this if you want for yourself. It's on page 688. Here's what Brother Sorensen and those who agree with him on this list have to say about those who still believe what the prophets have taught. Brother Sorensen says, there remain Latter-day Saints who insist that the final destruction of the Nephites took place in New York. But any such idea is manifestly absurd. Look at the people who teach that in fact happened. Hundreds of thousands of Nephites traipsing across the Mississippi Valley to New York, pursued by hundreds of thousands of Lamanites, is a scenario worthy only of a witless sci-fi movie, not of history. Well, that pretty well sums up the attitude of all of these intellectuals here, and it explains why we have so much confusion in the church today. I'll give you a couple more examples. This is a book called Charting the Book of Mormon from Brother Welch here, who's also the editor of BYU Studies. And in here where he talks about plausible settings, it says plausible locations of the final battles, in other words, Cumorah. This is the map that he gives everybody. You can see here it's a map of Central America. Show you that up close. This is the same map that's on the page of BYU Studies, a splash page. When you first go to it, there's a link to it at the bottom. So they're teaching that Cumorah is somewhere in southern Mexico and that the prophets are all wrong. Here's how it has a ramification. Here's a popular book, one of the most popular books right now, a Deseret Book about the Book of Mormon. It's the Book of Mormon for young readers. And it's teaching the same thing, that the prophets are wrong. Here, for example, on page 277, you can see it here. I'll put it close to the camera. But you can see how they're teaching that Cumorah is actually, here's the hill Cumorah right here, right there. The hill Cumorah is in Mexico. And what that's teaching the kids in the church, that all these prophets are wrong, that they were only speaking as men. And next we're going to look at the academic cycle and see how this has been perpetuated throughout the church. I think it's important for people to realize that. I could show you dozens of more examples of how these intellectuals have been able to imprint this idea on their students, and from their students onto their families and throughout the church. So